So, AJ, my eldest son, who's now, I don't know, 27 or 28, however old he is, he had asthma when he was small, like really quite sick at times and needed to be hospitalised. Only once or twice, I think. And I got to the stage where I was like, nope, this isn't happening. My child is not going to be on medication for the rest of his life. And so I started investigating alternative stuff and got him into swimming and all sorts of
My mother did all those things, yep.
But the thing is that by the time he was about, I don't know, maybe 13 or 14, maybe even younger than that, he didn't need anything at all, any asthma medication, and hasn't used anything for well over 10 years, probably longer. So does that mean that, how does that happen? Did I actually clear some of my grief, or did he clear some of his grief, or what happened with that?
When a child is small, really small, like, you know, just born to a few years old, who's the person has the most influence over them?
Yeah, the parent. And in this case, it was me, the mother.
Mum. So let's say mum. It's always going to be mum, probably, because in our Western society, that's the general way it happens. Now, as the child goes into, say, 6 or 7 years of age, how much connection now emotionally does he have to his mum? So his mum's still here. It's less, isn't it, than it was when he was 2, because when he was 2, probably still baby, still needed to be cared for food-wise. By this stage, they're starting to eat their own thing, you know, get their own snack out of the fridge, do a bit of stuff with friends. You'd be less around mum, yeah? And then by the time they were like 13 or 14, what's happening now?
Well, they're usually quite independent and making a lot of decisions for themselves.
Doing their own thing, having their own life, so forth. Almost every child onset disease has nothing to do with the child. It has everything to do with what the parent is doing emotionally. What's going on in the parent's own soul. Now, what causes asthma is a fear of grief that you don't want to feel.
Yeah, that's true, because I know that I've done a bit of processing around it, and I realised that his grief was that he had this huge job to fulfil because I needed somebody to love, and I didn't want to feel my grief around being alone.
And none of that is the truth.
No?
No. Because you didn't understand what I was saying to you. And many of you parents are still having this problem of not understanding what I'm saying to you. The child did not get their problem by any grief they had.
It's my unhealed, denied grief.
It's your fear of your grief. You see, when you have fear, this is something we need to understand. Again, it's a cause and effect issue. When we have fear, we do not understand the effect, as parents, we do not understand the effect it has on our children. Many of you think you're making your child safe by being afraid for their welfare. The reality is, fear is the worst possible emotion that you could potentially project at any living creature, including your own children. Your own fear is the worst. Now, how do you project it? By not owning it, by not actually feeling it. That's how you project it. So, whenever a parent does not own and feel their own fear, the child is feeling the full barrage of their fear. And in that moment, there is no love. Fear and love cannot coexist at the same time. Does everyone understand that basic principle about love and fear? And I'll say it again. Fear and love cannot coexist at the same time. As soon as you have fear inside of you as a parent, there is no longer any love coming out of you. And the child no longer feels loved immediately. Does that make sense to everyone? Now, this applies to every living creature around you as well. Every living creature around you, from insects and the smallest possible creatures, even viruses, right, and bacteria, right the way through to your own child, all respond to your fear. And as soon as your fear is present and denied, in other words, you're not feeling it, but it's present, every one of those things responds in a attacking or negative manner to the fear that is present. Does everyone get that? That's the soul creating something. Now, in this case, your soul and the denial of the fear of your grief created his childhood onset asthma. And as he grows, he disconnects from his mother more and more and more, and therefore is less connected to mum's emotions. And as a result, automatically has less asthma. Now, for many children who are as adults still have asthma, they have yet to actually disconnect from the mother's emotion, and therefore have yet to disconnect from her fear of her grief, and as a result are fully asthmatic still, even as an adult.
So basically we both still have to deal with our grief separately now as adults.
Well, no, his grief is very different to yours.
Yes.
His grief is that while you had a fear of your grief, he did not feel loved. So his grief is about not being loved. Your grief is not about that. Your grief is about different things. Do you understand? So they are very different emotions, and one is the grief in him is the result of your creation, but it's not the same emotion you have. And
yeah, that makes sense.
Does it make sense?
Yeah.
And this is what we forget as parents, is we're forgetting that it's our emotion denied that is now projected, and the child automatically, not only the child, every living organism around us responds to that denied emotion. Every tree around us, every bush around us, every insect around us, every child around us responds to that emotion. Now, because our child is very connected to us and very personally involved with us, they're going to have the largest response to that emotion generally. Yeah.
So because he's the eldest, he was the one that was most affected by my denied grief, because none of the others had asthma.
Yes, because usually a mother has the most fear of anything when she's the first-time mum. Is that not true?
Yeah.
How many of you were freaked out first-time mums? And then second time? A bit easier. The only thing that freaks you out then generally is the birth, and then so forth, isn't it? Generally it gets easier, you get more relaxed, both parents get more relaxed, they're both more into a routine, they understand the process, so there's less fear in the relationship with the child. The first child generally feels the fear the most, and as a result is more hooked into the parents' emotions than other subsequent children, unless subsequent children have other emotions that are being hooked in. For example, sometimes the first child is not the most approved of child because they felt the most fear, right? And therefore they had the largest fear response. You find in many households, in fact, that the first child has the most physical ailments as well, for the same reason. And then subsequent children often have less. But that is not a rule, it's just a general thing that happens for many families, because many families have dealt with some of their fear by the time the second child comes along. And then by the time the third child comes along, there's less fear and more projection of investment. So unfortunately, the younger childs actually get more investment emotionally. And when I say investment, the parents want things from them a lot more generally, and so then a lot of times the younger children have the opposite almost feelings that they've got to work their way through. They have feelings of demand, feeling that they can expect things, and all. So it's a general cycle that many families go through. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yep.